Mr. Darcy?
Miss Elizabeth?
In a world where love and marriage are not mutually exclusive, Pride and Prejudice follows the story of an Elizabeth Bennet and a Fitzwilliam Darcy and their journey to surviving all the social expectations that have been imposed on the both of them. We begin the story with the following quote. "It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a good wife. However little known the feelings of or views of a man may be on his first entering the neighborhood, this truth is so well fixed in the minds of the surrounding families that he is considered as the rightful property of some one or another of their daughters." Austen 7. We are immediately shown the societal pressures that plague both men and women. If you're a rich man, then you must want a good wife. If you're a woman, then you must want a good husband with a decent income. Emotions didn't matter on either side. Life's greatest challenge was if you can marry the best man. This causes a lot of stress on all sons and daughters, and it definitely causes a lot of stress on both Darcy and Elizabeth. Though there are definitely many points that we can talk about, that I can talk about in this video essay, I'll be focusing solely on Mr. Darcy and his character. How did he come to be so misunderstood? Beginning with how he was introduced and everybody's first impressions of him, I'll be looking specifically at the difference in his character when he's with the people of his own party and when he's in a social setting, his character with Elizabeth as the story progresses, and how I believe the two main characters' personalities work well together. Now, join me and don't close your eyes.
What was my friend like in Hertfordshire?
You really care to know? Prepare yourself for something very dreadful.
A ball is held in Hertfordshire, where new people have just arrived to the neighborhood. Among the new party of men and women, we meet Mr. Darcy. He is a fine, handsome man who is tall, has noble mien, and is pretty rich. His aura was looked upon with great admiration, until his manners gave a disgust. From the very beginning, Darcy has been introduced to everybody as a handsome man with a horrible attitude. He was a proud man who thought himself to be above the company around him and above being pleased. Although we never hear this being directly said from Darcy himself, this is basically just speculation that we all just believed from the get-go. He danced only with the women that he knew and denied being introduced to any new lady. He was the most disagreeable, disgraceful man any of the families have ever met. In this society, first impressions mean everything, and his first impression was worse. Everyone in Hertfordshire had collectively deemed Mr. Darcy as the proudest, most disagreeable man in the world, a man unworthy of being Mr. Bingley's friend. But what does this say about society itself? We've already established that this story takes place in a world where marriage is top priority, and everybody's sole purpose in life is to find a decent partner. But what about the personalities of the people? No matter who you are, you must not be an amiable person with a good attitude if you don't adhere to the social norms. It doesn't matter if you're near strangers. If you don't treat other people with the highest degree of respect, then you'll be shunned from the good eye of the public. I feel like this is a good example of how Mr. Darcy could just be considered of different personality and not insanely prideful. Perhaps he's just reserved and not haughty, as everybody would say he is. While first impressions of Darcy was absolute garbage, I saw him in a different light. Personally, I felt like he was just introverted. The reason why everybody thought his attitude and mannerisms were less than amiable was because they had never met anybody who did not conform to the expected personality of a rich man. He's not an extroverted man who enjoys dancing in the life of the party. Instead of introducing himself to every man, woman, mother, and child of the ball, Darcy kept to himself and talked only with the people that he was closest to, because that's where he felt the most comfortable. How can he fault a man for valuing his own comfort? This brings us to our next point. Mr. Darcy's attitude with the people he knows compared to his attitude with the public.
I do not have the talent of conversing easily with people I have never met before.
Perhaps you should take your aunt's advice and practice.
How could someone shame a person for straight up just not being able to talk? I cannot imagine Mr. Darcy as a prideful and arrogant man, especially if his character is proved to be subject to change according to the social setting. When you compare him when he is in a social gathering and when he is with his company, it'll obviously be different. After all, isn't that human nature, to put on a mask when you're in public with people you're not comfortable with, or have a different personality depending on the social setting? People think they know what's going on through Darcy's mind. He thinks himself above company and above being pleased. Did he say that himself? No, he didn't. This was not explicitly said by Darcy. It's just a collective prejudice based off of ignorance that society holds. Despite everyone being sure that they have a full grasp on Mr. Darcy's character and how he does not deserve Mr. Bingley's friendship, Mr. Bingley himself describes Mr. Darcy as an easy person. He's open, has a ductile temper, and is never dissatisfied. A prideful man is always dissatisfied. This information is incredibly important because this is the view we should all be holding on Mr. Darcy. After all, you should only believe the opinions of the people who see Mr. Darcy all the time, rather than the ones who have just met him. Our opinion is shaped by whatever the public says, though, because we heard that one first. That is our negative bias, and it overshadowed any preceding compliments. This same thing happens to Elizabeth Bennet. Bingley's sister's opinion is similar to her brother's, and she also gives us a deeper insight into Darcy's character as one of the people closest to him. He never speaks much unless among his intimate acquaintances. With him, he is remarkably agreeable. This, too, fell on deaf ears. Despite the closest people to Darcy expressing the positives of his character, the only opinion society held of Darcy was that he was an arrogant, prideful man. This negative opinion was taken by Elizabeth and was made 100% worse, to the point that anything bad that was said about Mr. Darcy, she trusted without bothering to fact-check the information. Such instance occurs when she and Mr. Wickham are conversing. As we already know, Mr. Wickham is less than reliable. And he makes sure to defame Darcy's image as defame his image as best as he could. But if she was so hell-bent on making sure that every negative opinion of Darcy's character was truth, then how did they end up falling for one another? Well, let's look at the way their relationship progresses throughout the story and see how their attitudes changed and grew together.
Why do you ask such a question?
To make out your character, Mr. Darcy.
And what have you discovered?
Very little. I hear such different accounts of you as puzzle me exceedingly.
I hope to afford you more clarity in the future.
From the very beginning, Elizabeth Bennet has never held a good opinion on Mr. Darcy, though it was sometimes reasonable as to why. Her first interaction with Darcy at the ball was one that understandably made her more annoyed at his character, especially since he insulted her handsomeness while in conversation with his friend. Every interaction preceding this comment was seen as a personal insult to her character, no matter what the context was. One of these contexts was when Elizabeth walked to the Netherfield estate to check up on her sister Jane after she got sick there. Despite Darcy's clear admiration for Elizabeth's act of walking from Longbourn to Netherfield and his honest way of speech, Elizabeth still observed every interaction with Darcy in a negative light. All her replies were quick and snarky and left little room for regular conversation. Every minor thing that Darcy would do was taken critically, and her negative bias was fed so heavily that whenever anybody said anything negative about Darcy, she took it and ran. This was especially true when she was talking with Mr. Wickham, which, again, gotta know, he's an unreliable source of information. Mr. Wickham watered the seed of Darcy hate that Elizabeth had already planted in her mind ever since the insult that Darcy made to her. Well, not to her. So, when Darcy's character continued to be less than favorable, Elizabeth's disdain for him only grew. Wickham's stories of Darcy's supposed mistreatment to him were accepted without question, reinforcing her negative bias and closing her off to any positive attributes that Darcy might display. However, as the story progresses and Elizabeth starts to see different sides of Darcy, such as his protectiveness over his sister and his genuine care for her family during Lydia's scandal, her perspective begins to shift. She starts to understand why his servants, friends, and sister all talked highly of Mr. Darcy's character, and all her prejudice begins to be broken down, one by one. She gradually realizes that her initial judgments might have been influenced by societal prejudice and misinformation, and she begins to accept that Mr. Darcy may very well be a suitable husband. After initially being rejected, Mr. Darcy understood that if he wanted to win Elizabeth's favor and love, then he should change himself. Or at least just let his true personality be more obvious. This is something that Elizabeth also learns to do. She takes down her walls and starts to look at things through a less prejudiced perspective.
You're too proud, Mr. Darcy. And would you consider pride a fault or a virtue?
That I couldn't say.
Because we're doing our best to find a fault in you.
Maybe it's that I find it hard to forgive the follies and vices of others, or their offences against me. My good opinion, once lost, is lost forever.
Dear, I cannot tease you about that. What a shame, for I dearly love to laugh.
A family trait, I think.
Somehow, despite being two completely different people with their own individual personalities, Darcy and Elizabeth are actually quite similar in their views. Not even a person's social status can prevent them both from having the same qualities as someone above or below their rank. The most obvious of these qualities is, as the title suggests, their pride and their prejudice. They both have their own forms of pride and prejudice. Darcy is prideful because of his high social status and is prejudiced against those of lower class, thinking them to not be up to his standards. This pride and prejudice is also evident in his first proposal to Elizabeth, when he was sure that she would accept his hand because of all that he could offer as a wealthy man who was interested in her. Elizabeth, on the other hand, is prideful of her ability to judge character, which turns out to be flawed when her own personal feelings are affected, and prejudiced in how she views Darcy, Wickham, and at times Bingley. Because of her pride, she was too stubborn to admit that her judgment on Darcy was unjust and too harsh, and that her judgment on Wickham was too good. For both characters, this stubbornness is born out of their mutual unwillingness to conform to societal norms and the expectation of being a proper man and woman. This deviation they both chose to partake in is what makes them so known in society. I feel like the stubbornness that they both held challenged them to alter their points of views, and later on, it forced them to change. Darcy forced Elizabeth to realize that her judgment of him was not properly assessed, and Elizabeth forced Darcy to realize that the way he carried himself in the eye of the public created a negative image on him and his character. Even though they both don't care about the public opinion, they both did care about the opinion of the people closest to them, which is why Darcy lets down his guard with Lizzie and allows her to see his true, raw self. And Elizabeth lets down her guard and accepts Darcy's true personality, and later on, his love. Aww.
If, however, your feelings have changed, I would have to tell you. You have bewitched me, body and soul, and I love you. I never wish to be parted from you from this day on.
Well then. Your hands are cold.
In conclusion, Darcy's character is a complex mesh of societal expectations, personal disposition, and evolving perceptions. By understanding the social context and looking beyond first impressions, we can appreciate the depth and growth of Mr. Darcy's character, making him one of the most enduring and intriguing characters of all literature. The relationship between Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy is a journey of overcoming their flaws and learning to see each other for who they truly are, hence why their personalities complemented each other super well. They both grew and changed. They found a balance that allowed them to understand and appreciate one another deeply. To me, it is a truth universally acknowledged that Pride and Prejudice is a timeless novel, a timeless romance novel of all history, and a perfect example of what true love should entail.
couldn't sleep.
Nora.
These are peacock feathers. Miss Zeba, please don't hate me. Peacocks. 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 Yeah, anyways. Who doesn't want a man like Mr. Darcy? Hot, he's tall, he's rich, and he'll solve your problems for you without even asking. And for free! That is the man that I want. Aww. I'm about to fall asleep. It's 3:27 a.m. Expectations, or at least she represents them. Expectations. Sorry, not expectations. Bye.
I couldn't sleep.
Nora.